Marcus Thompson stared at his computer screen in his gray cubicle on the 47th floor of a Manhattan skyscraper. The email was only 3 sentences long, but it shattered everything he thought he knew about his future. Due to budget restructuring, your position has been eliminated. Your last day will be Friday. HR will contact you regarding your severance package. 5 years of 12-hour days, missed family dinners, and sacrificed dreams, gone in 3 sentences. But what Marcus discovered in the next 72 hours would prove that sometimes losing everything is the only way to find what you were actually meant to do. If you've ever felt trapped in a job that's slowly crushing your soul, if you've ever wondered if there's more to life than the 9-to-5 grind, this story will show you that your biggest setback might just be your greatest setup. Hit that subscribe button right now if you're ready to be inspired by what's possible when you bet on yourself. Marcus had what everyone called a good job, senior financial analyst at Morrison & Associates, one of Wall Street's most prestigious firms. 6-figure salary, corner office views, business class travel, and a benefits package that made his parents proud. But success felt like a beautifully decorated prison cell. Every morning at 6:15 a.m., Marcus would stand on the subway platform in his $2,000 suit, surrounded by hundreds of other people in identical $2,000 suits, all heading to identical glass towers to spend identical days analyzing numbers that felt increasingly meaningless. The work itself wasn't difficult. Marcus was brilliant with financial models and had an intuitive understanding of market trends. His colleagues respected him. His boss trusted him with the firm's biggest clients, and his annual reviews were consistently outstanding. So why did he feel like he was slowly disappearing? The breaking point had been building for months. It started with small things: feeling physically sick on Sunday nights, knowing Monday was coming, zoning out during client meetings while daydreaming about anything else, watching the clock like a prisoner counting down his sentence. Then came the bigger signs. Marcus had stopped talking to his college friends because every conversation reminded him of the dreams he'd abandoned. His girlfriend, Jessica, had started making comments about how he seemed checked out even when they were together. His younger sister had asked him directly, "When did you become so gray?" Gray. That word haunted him. When had he become gray? Marcus remembered being 22, fresh out of college, full of ideas about starting his own business, traveling the world, maybe writing a book about his grandfather's immigration story from Nigeria. But then came the student loans, the pressure to be practical, the seductive security of a steady paycheck. One compromise led to another until he found himself 29 years old, making more money than he'd ever imagined and feeling more lost than he'd ever been. The night before he was laid off, Marcus had been working late again, missing his nephew's birthday party. As he sat alone in his office at 11 p.m., he asked himself a question that terrified him. If I continue on this path, who will I become? He didn't like the answer. The immediate aftermath of being laid off was surreal. Marcus cleaned out his desk, shook hands with colleagues who avoided eye contact, and walked out of the building that had defined his identity for 5 years. Standing on the sidewalk with a cardboard box of his personal belongings, Marcus felt something unexpected: relief. For the first time in years, tomorrow wasn't planned. There was number 7 a.m. meeting, no quarterly report deadline, no client presentation to prepare. The absence of obligation felt like stepping out of a too-tight shoe he'd forgotten he was wearing. At weekend, Marcus did something he hadn't done since college. He slept until he naturally woke up. It was 10:30 a.m. on a Saturday, and instead of feeling guilty about wasting the morning, he felt human. Jessica noticed the change immediately. "You look different," she said over breakfast. More present. With his severance package providing a financial cushion, Marcus gave himself permission to explore what he actually wanted to do with his life. He started small. He visited his local library for the first time in a decade and spent hours browsing sections he'd never explored. In the entrepreneurship section, he found a book about food trucks that sparked something he'd forgotten he had: curiosity. Growing up, Marcus had spent every summer helping his grandmother in her kitchen. learning traditional Nigerian recipes that had been passed down through generations. He'd always been the family member everyone called when they needed help planning a menu or wanted to recreate one of Grandma's dishes. That night, Marcus called his grandmother. "Grandma, remember those Scotch bonnet chicken skewers you taught me? The ones with the special spice blend?" "Of course, baby. You're thinking about cooking again?" "Maybe. Would you be willing to teach me more of your recipes? The ones you learned from your mother?" There was a long pause, and his grandmother's voice brightened. "Marcus, I've been waiting 30 years for someone to ask me that question." What started as conversations with his grandmother evolved into something neither of them expected, a cultural mission. As Marcus learned more family recipes, he realized he wasn't just learning to cook. He was connecting with a heritage that his busy corporate life had caused him to neglect. Each dish came with stories. His great-grandfather's journey from Lagos to New York in 1952. His grandmother's first job in America, working in restaurant kitchens while studying English at night. The way food had served as both comfort and connection for generations of his family. 3 weeks after being laid off, Marcus made his first major decision. He used part of his severance to rent a small commercial kitchen space in Queens. Not to start a restaurant that felt too big, but to experiment with creating a food business that could share his family's story. The first batch of Scotch bonnet chicken skewers he made in that kitchen was a disaster. Too spicy for most palates, inconsistent seasoning, presentation that looked more like cafeteria food than something people would pay for. But his grandmother tasted it and said something that changed everything. "The flavor is right, Marcus. The heart is there. Everything else can be learned." Single quotes. Marcus started small. He convinced a local farmer's market to let him set up a booth on weekends. His first day, he sold $73 worth of food to curious customers who were drawn in by the amazing aromas and stayed because of Marcus's genuine enthusiasm for sharing his family's story. Week by week, his customer base grew. Not because the food was perfect. It wasn't. But because people could taste the authenticity. They could hear the passion in Marcus's voice when he explained the history behind each spice blend. More importantly, Marcus discovered something he'd never experienced in his corporate job, the joy of seeing an immediate, positive impact from his work. When customers smiled after tasting his grandmother's recipes, when they came back the following week with friends, when they asked him to cater their family gatherings, Marcus felt a sense of purpose that no quarterly bonus had ever provided. The turning point came when a food blogger discovered his stand and wrote a review that went viral on social media. "Marcus, Thompson isn't just serving food, he's serving heritage, connection, and the kind of authenticity that makes you remember why you fell in love with trying new flavors in the first place." The viral review changed everything, but not in the way Marcus expected. Instead of being overwhelmed by sudden fame, he found himself with a clear choice: scale up thoughtfully or risk losing what made his food special in the first place. Marcus chose thoughtful growth. He brought his grandmother on as his official head of cultural heritage, a role that involved not just recipe development, but storytelling, training, and maintaining the authenticity that customers loved. Together, they developed a business model that was part food service, part cultural education. Each dish came with a card explaining its history and significance. Marcus started offering cooking classes where people could learn not just the techniques, but the stories behind traditional Nigerian cuisine. The farmer's market booth evolved into a food truck, which they named Heritage Kitchen. But this wasn't just any food truck. It was a mobile cultural experience. The exterior was decorated with artwork celebrating African diaspora food traditions. And inside, Marcus had installed a small display showcasing family photos and historical artifacts. 6 months after being laid off, Marcus was working harder than he ever had in corporate America, but it felt completely different. He was up at 4 a.m., preparing ingredients, managing suppliers, training part-time employees, handling social media, and doing all the unglamorous work that comes with building a business from scratch. The difference was that every challenging day felt like an investment in something meaningful, rather than time served in someone else's dream. His success metrics had completely changed too. Instead of tracking quarterly profit margins, Marcus measured success by the number of customers who told him his food reminded them of their own family's heritage. The cooking class students who went home excited to share new recipes with their loved ones, and the messages from other young entrepreneurs who said his story inspired them to pursue their own authentic paths. The financial success followed naturally. By the end of his first year, Heritage Kitchen was generating more revenue than Marcus had made as a senior financial analyst. More importantly, he was building equity in his own business rather than making someone else wealthy. But the real transformation was personal. Marcus's relationship with Jessica deepened as she watched him become passionate about life again. His family relationships strengthened as his work brought him closer to his cultural roots. He was sleeping better, laughing more, and felt energized by challenges rather than drained by them. 2 years after receiving that devastating layoff email, Marcus was invited to speak at his old university's business school. As he stood in front of 200 students wearing the same type of suits he used to wear, he realized how much his definition of success had evolved. "How many of you," he asked the audience, "are planning careers in industries you're passionate about versus industries you think will make you successful?" About 15 hands went up out of 200. "I used to be one of the 185 of you with your hands down," Marcus continued. "I chose financial security over personal fulfillment, and for a long time, that felt like the smart choice. It took losing my job to realize I had actually lost myself." Marcus shared the full story: the golden handcuffs, the layoff, the fear, the small first steps, and the gradual building of something authentic. But he was careful not to romanticize the journey. Starting Heritage Kitchen was terrifying, he admitted. "There were months when I wasn't sure I'd be able to pay rent. There were days when I questioned whether I was being irresponsible, whether I should just find another corporate job and accept that work isn't supposed to be fulfilling. But here's what I learned. The biggest risk isn't failing at something you care about. The biggest risk is succeeding at something that doesn't matter to you. Because that kind of success is actually failure in disguise." After his presentation, a young woman approached him with tears in her eyes. "I'm a senior accounting major," she said, "but I've always wanted to start a nonprofit helping kids in underserved communities learn financial literacy. Everyone tells me I should work at a big firm first to gain experience. But your story makes me think maybe I should just start." Marcus smiled. "What's one small step you could take this week toward that nonprofit dream?" 6 months later, that student sent Marcus a message. She had started a weekend financial literacy program at a local community center. It was small, serving only 12 kids, but it was real, it was meaningful, and it was hers. That message reminded Marcus why his own transformation mattered beyond personal success. By choosing authenticity over security, by betting on his own dreams instead of someone else's, he had given others permission to do the same. Heritage Kitchen now employed 8 people and had expanded to 3 food trucks serving different parts of New York City. Marcus had been featured in major food magazines, appeared on cooking shows, and was working on a cookbook that would share not just recipes, but the immigration stories and cultural heritage behind traditional dishes. But the success Marcus was most proud of was simpler. He woke up excited about his day. His work felt like an extension of who he was, rather than something separate from his identity. He had learned that careers aren't just about making money, they're about making meaning. The day everything changed for Marcus wasn't the day he got laid off. It was the day he decided that losing his job was actually finding his path. Marcus's story proves that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the best thing that ever happened to you, but only if you have the courage to see setbacks as setups for something better. Maybe you're in your own corporate prison right now, feeling gray, wondering if there's more to life than the paycheck. Maybe you've been laid off and you're terrified about what comes next. Or maybe you're one of those students in the audience, trying to choose between security and passion. Here's what Marcus's journey teaches us. Your authentic path is always available to you, but you have to be brave enough to take the first small step. You don't need to quit your job tomorrow or start a food truck next week, but you can start exploring what actually matters to you today. What's your heritage kitchen? What's the thing you're passionate about that you've been putting off because it feels too risky or impractical? Let me know in the comments. Your story might inspire someone else to take their first brave step. If this story reminded you that it's never too late to change direction, that passion and authenticity can be profitable, and that sometimes losing everything is the only way to find what you're truly meant to do, then subscribe to this channel. I share stories every week about ordinary people who chose extraordinary courage, and I want to make sure you never miss the one that might change your life. Hit that subscribe button, ring the notification bell, and remember, your current situation is not your final destination. The day everything changes is closer than you think.